There is a version of you that survived, but not a version of you that will take you where you're meant to go. You're not stuck. You're just attached to the person you no longer are. There comes a moment in every life when comfort becomes too small for the size of the soul. A moment when the life you built, the habits you followed, the emotions you carried, start to feel like clothes that no longer fit you. This is the moment you must stop trying to fix the old you and start focusing on becoming the new you. Because the truth is simple. You cannot step into your future while dragging your past in both hands. There is a strange truth about human nature. The things we avoid do not disappear. They disguise themselves. They hide in our reactions, our patterns, our habits, and our choices. What you refuse to face in yourself doesn't stay silent. It becomes the architect of your future. It influences how you think, how you love, how you trust, and how you move through the world. The unexamined parts of you don't die. They simply take control without your permission. Every person carries a shadow, an inner world made of suppressed emotions, ignored wounds, forgotten memories, and truths we aren't ready to admit. Some people spend their entire lives trying to outrun this part of themselves. They bury their pain under achievements. They silence their fears with distractions. They avoid their insecurities by projecting them onto others. And they numb their discomfort with habits that give temporary relief but long-term damage. But no matter how fast you run, your shadow keeps pace. It shapes your choices in relationships. It dictates the kind of people you attract. It influences the opportunities you pursue or sabotage. It determines how much love you accept, how much happiness you allow, how much success you feel worthy of. If you refuse to face your abandonment wounds, you chase or cling. If you refuse to face your pride, you isolate yourself behind false strength. If you refuse to face your fear of failure, you never take the steps that would change your life. Avoidance is not harmless. It's expensive. And the price is your potential. Facing yourself is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. The kind of honesty that doesn't flatter the ego. It forces you to acknowledge the ways you've contributed to your own suffering. It asks you to revisit the stories that shaped you, not to blame the past, but to understand it. It invites you to sit with emotions you've been escaping for years. It demands courage, patience, and humility. But facing yourself is also freeing, because the moment you turn toward your own inner world instead of away from it, something powerful happens. You stop living on autopilot. You stop allowing old wounds to dictate your reactions. You stop letting fear choose your limitations. You stop letting past versions of you control present decisions. When you face your anger, you stop exploding or suppressing and start understanding. When you face your insecurity, you stop seeking validation and start building self-worth. When you face your loneliness, you stop settling for connections that drain you. When you face your disappointment, you stop believing life has abandoned you. The moment you acknowledge the truth within you, the truth begins to transform you. What you refuse to face grows in the dark. What you confront loses its power. It's not about judging yourself. It's about meeting yourself fully, honestly, compassionately. It's about becoming aware of the patterns that no longer serve you. It's about understanding the emotions that have been calling for your attention. It's about giving yourself the chance to heal instead of repeating the same cycles disguised as different experiences. Growth doesn't begin the moment you become stronger. It begins the moment you become truthful, and nothing is more truthful than looking at your own reflection without filters. Not the reflection you present to the world, but the one you've avoided in the privacy of your own heart. Every destiny has two paths, one shaped by avoidance and one shaped by awareness. When you avoid yourself, life remains repetitive. When you face yourself, life becomes expansive. You begin to make choices aligned with who you want to become rather than who you've been taught to be. You begin to rewrite beliefs that were never yours. You begin to develop emotional maturity, clarity, resilience, and strength. You begin to build a life based on intention instead of instinct. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has met every corner of themselves. Their light, their shadow, their wounds, their desires, their fears, their truth. Because once you face yourself, nothing outside of you has the power to control you anymore. What you refuse to face in yourself will quietly shape your destiny. But what you choose to face will boldly transform it. Life is made of chapters, and each version of you was written for a specific moment, a specific lesson, a specific season. You were not meant to remain who you were at 15, at 25, or even last year. You are meant to evolve, transform, expand, destroy old narratives, and step into new ones. Yet, many people treat their past selves like permanent homes rather than temporary stops along the way. They cling to versions of themselves they should have thanked and released long ago. The truth is simple. You outgrow yourself just as naturally as you outgrow old clothes, old beliefs, old environments, and old behaviors. But because familiarity feels safe, people often mistake comfort for belonging. They stay in identities that no longer match their spirit. They repeat habits that no longer reflect their values. They hold on to relationships they've already emotionally evolved beyond. They continue living as someone they've already surpassed internally. Every version of you served a purpose. The version of you that tolerated too much taught you about boundaries. The version of you that feared everything taught you about courage. The version of you that doubted your worth taught you what self-respect feels like. The version of you that kept choosing pain taught you what healing requires. None of these versions were mistakes, they were teachers. But teachers aren't meant to be lived with forever. You learn from them, then you move on. The challenge is that outgrowing yourself often feels like loss. You mourn your old identity even when it no longer fits. You feel guilty for not relating to certain people the way you once did. You feel confused when the things that used to excite you now feel empty. Growth disrupts familiarity, and the ego resists that disruption. But resisting your evolution doesn't stop it. It only makes it painful. There is a moment in life when the soul whispers, it's time. Time to let go of the version of you that was built in survival mode. Time to release the beliefs you adopted to feel safe. Time to let go of dreams that no longer align with the person you've become. Time to stop shrinking yourself to fit into chapters you've already finished reading. People often feel guilty for outgrowing others, but the truth is that you outgrow people for the same reason you outgrow behaviors. You are becoming more aligned with your truth. Some people were meant to support an earlier chapter, not the entire story. Some relationships belong to a version of you that no longer exists. And some connections feel heavy, not because something is wrong with you, but because you have elevated beyond them. Outgrowing old versions of yourself isn't betrayal, it's evolution. You are not abandoning who you were. You are honoring who you are becoming. You are recognizing that life is movement, not stillness. You are understanding that stagnation is just another form of self-abandonment. When you refuse to grow, you deny yourself the future that is trying to unfold for you. It takes courage to admit you've changed. It takes even more courage to live according to that change, to say, that used to be me, but it's not anymore. To say, I needed that version, but I don't need to stay there. To say, who I was is not who I must continue to be. These statements are not rejections of your past. They are declarations that you are allowed to evolve beyond it. Sometimes the old you will call you back, not because it's right for you, but because it's familiar. You'll feel tempted to repeat the same patterns, to follow the same impulses, to seek the same validation, to fall back into the comfort of your former identity. But every time you return to an outdated version of yourself, you feel the tension, the inner knowing that you've already moved past that chapter. You feel the discomfort of living smaller than your spirit. You feel the dull ache of ignoring your own evolution. This discomfort is not punishment, it is guidance. It is your inner self reminding you that you've outgrown this place. Growth sometimes feels like loneliness because the next version of you requires space. It requires shedding. It requires stillness. It requires a temporary emptiness before new meaning fills in. But that emptiness is sacred. It is the space where transformation happens. It is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. When you allow yourself to grow, you give permission for life to meet you at a higher level. You begin attracting experiences that match your new energy. You begin recognizing opportunities that the old you would have overlooked. You begin making choices that align with your future rather than your fears. You begin seeing yourself as someone capable, worthy, evolving, and alive. Every version of you was necessary. Every version of you contributed to your becoming. But none of those versions were meant to hold you forever. They were chapters, important, meaningful, transformative chapters, but not the final story. Every human being carries a shadow, a collection of fears, impulses, disappointments, insecurities, desires, memories, and emotions that we learn to push out of sight because we believe they were unacceptable or dangerous. The shadow is not a flaw in your design, it is a natural part of being human. It contains the parts of you you've hidden, ignored, judged, or abandoned. And yet, despite being pushed into darkness, it continues to influence your thoughts, choices, relationships, and behaviors. The shadow is not trying to punish you, it is trying to be understood. Most people are taught to fear their shadow because it contains the pieces of themselves they don't want others to see. Anger, jealousy, shame, vulnerability, desire, sadness. These emotions are labeled as negative, so they are pushed down into the subconscious. But burying them doesn't erase them. They show up as outbursts, as insecurities, as patterns you can't explain, as reactions you regret, as attraction to people who reflect what you haven't healed. Avoiding your shadow doesn't make it disappear. It simply gives it more silent control. The shadow only becomes an enemy when it is rejected. When you treat it as something to hide from, it becomes something that hides inside you, influencing your life from a place you can't reach. But the moment you turn toward it with curiosity rather than fear, it loses its power and reveals its purpose. The shadow is the part of you that holds your unprocessed experiences. It contains the emotions you were not ready to feel, the truths you were not ready to admit, the wounds you were not ready to heal. It waits patiently, not to punish you, but to guide you toward wholeness. Integration is not about glorifying the shadow or acting out every suppressed emotion. It is about understanding the messages behind those emotions. When anger rises, it may be protecting a boundary you never learned to enforce. When jealousy appears, it may be highlighting desires you've been too afraid to claim. When sadness comes, it may be asking you to grieve what you never allowed yourself to mourn. When fear surfaces, it may be pointing out parts of your life that are ready to evolve. These emotional signals are not signs of weakness, they are invitations to self-awareness. Everyone has parts of themselves they've labeled as unacceptable. Maybe you were taught not to cry, so you buried your tenderness. Maybe you were taught not to be weak, so you buried your vulnerability. Maybe you were taught to avoid conflict, so you buried your voice. Maybe you were told to be perfect, so you buried your authenticity. Your shadow holds all these rejected pieces, not because they're bad, but because they were misunderstood. To integrate your shadow is to bring these pieces back into the light with compassion. It means acknowledging that you are more complex than the mask you present to the world. It means accepting that your emotions have a purpose, not a shame attached to them. It means recognizing that healing requires honesty, not avoidance. Integration restores balance. It allows you to respond instead of react, understand instead of suppress, grow instead of repeat. When you integrate your shadow, you reclaim your power. You stop being afraid of your own depth, your own emotions, your own humanity. You begin to notice your triggers and understand their origins. You stop attracting situations that reflect your unhealed wounds. You become more grounded, more self-aware, more emotionally intelligent. Instead of being controlled by your subconscious, you become the one guiding your life consciously. The shadow also holds tremendous potential. Hidden within it are the strengths you never embraced. Your assertiveness, your creativity, your intuition, your passion, your natural instincts. Many people suppress their power because they associate it with judgment or rejection. But your power doesn't disappear when you hide it, it simply waits. Integration allows dormant strengths to rise again, not as chaotic impulses, but as refined, intentional qualities. Healing is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. Wholeness requires you to acknowledge every part of yourself, even the ones you were taught to hide. When you stop fearing your shadow, you begin to understand that it is not darkness. It is the unlit portion of your inner world waiting to be illuminated. It is the part of you that carries the very lessons you need in order to transform. Your shadow does not want to destroy your life. It wants to free you from the parts of your past that still hold you captive. It wants integration because integration brings peace. It wants acknowledgement because acknowledgement brings healing. It wants understanding. It wants understanding because understanding brings transformation. Every transformation begins with a truth that most people avoid. Your future self is not created in some distant moment of inspiration. It is created in the small, consistent choices you make every day. The life you want, the strength you desire, the clarity you seek, and the peace you long for are not waiting somewhere outside of you. They are already present, hidden behind the habits, patterns, and behaviors you've grown comfortable with, even if those habits limit you more than they serve you. People often believe that becoming a better version of themselves requires something external, a new opportunity, a sudden breakthrough, a dramatic shift in circumstances. But the greatest transformation is always internal. It begins when you become honest with yourself about the routines you cling to, the distractions you use to avoid discomfort, the emotional patterns you repeat unconsciously, and the behaviors you've normalized simply because they feel familiar. Familiarity is one of the strongest anchors to the old self, even when the familiar is painful or destructive. The truth is that you already know which habits keep you small. You already know which choices drain your potential. You already know which patterns pull you away from the person you want to be. The problem is not knowing, the problem is letting go. Letting go feels like loss. Letting go feels like stepping into the unknown. Letting go feels like dismantling the identity you've relied on for years. Even harmful habits can feel safe when they've become part of your daily rhythm. Your future self, the version of you with clarity, discipline, confidence, peace, and purpose, is not unreachable. That version is simply buried beneath layers of repetition. Every habit is a doorway. Some lead you forward, some keep you trapped, and some drag you backward. The person you are meant to become stands behind the doors you're afraid to open, because opening them means closing the ones that once helped you cope, survive, or avoid what you weren't ready to face. Some habits are not physical, they are emotional. The habit of doubting yourself, the habit of giving up quickly, the habit of expecting disappointment, the habit of shrinking to make others comfortable, the habit of chasing validation, the habit of numbing your pain instead of healing it. These emotional patterns shape your identity more than your daily routines ever will. And your future self can only emerge when you confront these internal cycles and choose something different. Transformation doesn't require perfection, it requires willingness. The willingness to be uncomfortable. The willingness to release the attachments that define your past. The willingness to rewrite the behaviors that once protected you but now limit you. The willingness to choose discipline over impulse, clarity over avoidance, and intention over habit. The willingness to recognize that your potential is not blocked by external forces, but by internal resistance. Behind every habit you fear releasing is a deeper reason you hold on to it. Some habits soothe your emotions. Some habits distract you from pain. Some habits prevent you from feeling vulnerable. Some habits give you temporary comfort when you don't yet know how to create lasting peace. Understanding these reasons doesn't excuse the habits. It reveals the path to transforming them. You can't change what you won't acknowledge. You can't grow from what you refuse to feel. And you can't become your future self while clinging to the comforts of your past. Letting go is not just about discipline, it's about identity. When you release a habit, you are not just changing an action, you are reshaping the kind of person you believe yourself to be. If you believe you're someone who always quits, you'll keep quitting. If you believe you're someone who isn't worthy of success, you'll sabotage your progress. If you believe you're someone who can't change, you won't try. Your habits don't just reflect your identity, they reinforce it. Releasing old habits requires a shift in how you see yourself. It requires you to imagine, with full ownership, the version of you who lives with clarity, strength, purpose, and discipline. This version is not imaginary. It already exists within you, waiting for space to breathe. It waits behind every decision where you choose growth over comfort. It waits behind every moment where you resist the urge to repeat what no longer serves you. It waits behind every small step toward a life aligned with your values rather than your fears. The person you are meant to become does not appear magically. This person emerges the moment you decide you no longer want to be ruled by the behaviors that keep you stuck. Your future self is not in the distance. It is beneath the layers of your old patterns, waiting for you to release what you once needed so you can rise into who you were always capable of being. There is a moment in every person's life when the old self begins to feel too small, a moment when your patterns feel predictable, your habits feel limiting, and your identity feels outdated. This moment isn't a crisis, it's an invitation. An invitation to expand beyond the version of you that survived and grow into the version of you that is meant to thrive. But this requires daring. It requires courage to step into the unknown, because outgrowing your old self means stepping into territory your past cannot guide you through. Most of the doors meant for your future cannot open for the version of you that is still attached to your past. Life doesn't withhold expansion, it waits for alignment. It waits for the moment you decide you no longer want to live inside the same emotional walls, the same beliefs, the same routines, the same fears. The doors meant for growth don't respond to who you used to be. They respond to who you are willing to become. The old self is built from survival. It carries the coping mechanisms you needed when life was overwhelming. It carries voices from your childhood that shaped your perspective. It carries old fears, outdated beliefs, and familiar behaviors designed to keep you safe when you didn't yet have the tools to choose differently. But survival mode habits cannot carry you into purpose. They cannot carry you into strength, peace, love, abundance, or alignment. Outgrowing your old self is the price of entering the life meant for your growth. What most people don't realize is that life is constantly responding to the choices you make. When you cling to your old identity, life keeps giving you experiences that match it, not as punishment, but as reflection. Life mirrors your internal state. When you keep choosing cycles that drain you, life keeps presenting situations that reinforce those cycles because you haven't shown it you're ready for anything new. But the moment you make a different decision, even a small one, something shifts. The energy changes. The path begins to open. The universe responds to movement, not intention alone. Outgrowing your old self doesn't happen in a dramatic singular moment. It happens in quiet decisions repeated consistently. The decision to say no to what drains you. The decision to walk away from what shrinks you. The decision to choose honesty over comfort. The decision to set boundaries where you once stayed silent. The decision to acknowledge your worth where you once accepted less. These decisions feel small in the moment, but they are powerful signals to life that you are ready for more. People often wait for new opportunities before they change. But growth works the opposite way. You change first, and then the opportunities appear. You take the leap, and then the path forms beneath your feet. You let go, and then the new enters. Life opens doors only when you stop clinging to the ones that have already served their purpose. Some doors will only appear when you walk away from the room you've outgrown. Some opportunities are only visible from a higher version of yourself. Some blessings are designed for the future you, not the past you. And you cannot access them until you step beyond the threshold of familiarity. Outgrowing your old self is uncomfortable for a reason. Growth requires leaving behind patterns that once felt like home. It requires releasing people who were only aligned with earlier chapters of your journey. It requires breaking emotional habits that kept you safe but small. It requires sitting in temporary emptiness while your new identity forms. But this discomfort is not a sign that you're making the wrong decision. It is a sign that you are crossing into expansion. Life does not reward who you were, it rewards who you are becoming. When you rise to meet the next level of yourself, life rises to meet you. People who once overlooked you begin to notice you. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach begin to align with you. Situations that once intimidated you begin to feel natural. This is not luck, it is resonance. You are attracting what matches your new identity rather than your old limitations. There are doors with your name on them that will never open for the version of you that doubts your worth. There are paths waiting that require the version of you who trusts your inner voice. There are blessings written for the version of you who is no longer afraid to let go of old patterns. Everything you desire already exists. You are simply growing into the version of yourself capable of receiving it. And the moment you dare to outgrow your old self, life responds, not slowly, not quietly, but unmistakably, by revealing doors, opportunities, connections, and possibilities that were invisible until you became someone who could walk through them.